Because if you think about it, if, for example, the patch failed or took down systems for an hour, what does that look like in terms of lost revenue or profits compared to if a threat actor that is known to use ransomware successfully exploits that vulnerability and they deploy ransomware on your systems? You're potentially looking at days to weeks of downtime, and that's going to be very high in terms of lost revenue or profits.
Welcome to CISO Unscripted. In this series, we tackle the hottest cybersecurity trends and the headlines and provide you with Unit 42's practical strategies to defend against emerging cyber threats and the adversaries driving them. I am your host, Mitch Mayne from Unit 42. Today, I am talking to Matt Brady. Matt is a senior researcher with the Unit 42 team, where he works directly with organizations on trending cyber topics. He's got over a decade of cyber threat intelligence experience across multiple sectors, and specifically retail. Matt, welcome back to CISO Unscripted.
Thanks for having me back, Mitch.
All right, so Matt, you wrote a brief in October on a group known as Scattered Lapsus Hunters. So these guys are known to be fast-moving, high-impact campaigns, a taste for disruption. Since then, we've seen some developments that are probably worth unpacking, especially as retailers enter their most targeted time of year when speed, volume, and human fatigue all seem to collide. So I want to look at 4 angles with you today. Number 1, what is new since your last brief and why it matters now? Number 2, how these actors are evolving and what are the signs for 2026? And number 3, what retail organizations should be watching for most closely this season? And last, of course, and not least, is finally your one piece of advice for CISOs preparing for the year ahead. Ready?
Let's do it.
So let's start with the group's name, Scattered Lapsus Hunters. This sounds a little bit like a word mashup to me. So it suggests fragmentation and adaptation. Now, from an intel perspective, what defines this particular actor set, and what does their emergence tell us about how cybercrime is changing?
Yeah, so I think long story short, we're just seeing a lot of convergence in the cybercrime ecosystem. So for Scattered Lapsus Hunters in particular, think of it as less of one cohesive group and more of a loosely knit network of like-minded cyber criminals. So Scattered Lapsus Hunters is essentially comprised of 3 separate, but again, like-minded entities, one of which is Scattered Spider, which Unit 42 tracks as Muddled Libra. So they've been responsible for a number of high-profile ransomware attacks in 2025, including those against the retail sector. Then we have Shiny Hunters, which Unit 42 tracks as Bling Libra. This is a group that has not been deploying ransomware, but more focused on data theft and extortion attacks. So think data theft without any sort of encryption event, but the outcome in terms of trying to successfully get a ransom payment from an organization is the same. And then you've got Lapsus, which is a group that historically did a lot of social engineering, SIM swapping types of attacks. These 3 entities are or have been causing a lot of chaos throughout 2025, and we expect them to likely reemerge with a lot of the same tactics, techniques, and procedures once we get into the new year of 2026.
All right, so this helps us to understand a little bit about what's going on in the background. So tell me, since your last briefing on this group, what standout developments have emerged that retail CISOs should be watching for right now?
Yeah, so since we last published our latest threat article, the threat actors have seemingly gone quiet across the Telegram channels. They have stood up a number of different Telegram channels in the last few months. Some of them have been disabled. Some of them they've simply just, kind of abandoned. One of the potential causes for this is the group did leak personal information for hundreds of government officials back in mid-October. That included folks that work for DHS, the DOJ, the FBI, and ICE. This could be why they posted a message on one of their Telegram channels saying they wouldn't be leaking any more data right around the same time that they had advertised the data for over 1 billion records for folks that had used Salesforce and Salesloft Drift. There has been some speculation that the group members might have been arrested, but that's unconfirmed at this time. So basically how we're looking at this is the group is seemingly taking a break from their activities, but they promised to return in 2026 So organizations still need to keep this criminal syndicate on their radar for sure, even if they take a few months off at the end of this year.
All right. So quiet doesn't necessarily translate into safe.
Correct.
All right. So let's look ahead at 2026. What shifts in strategy or tactics by scattered Lapsus Hunters would you tell organizations to prepare for today?
Yeah, so there's three things, and this all comes from the activity that we had, kept our eyes on from their Telegram channels. First of which is extortion-as-a-service. So think of this very similarly to ransomware as a service. The playbooks are very similar. It's just with extortion, there is no usage of ransomware. There's no encryption. Therefore, there's likely no operational disruption. But this is where I look at the Bling Libra, aka Shiny Hunters entity. They are the ones that spun up the data leak site for the alleged sales loft drift data that was stolen. So I think we're going to see more of extortion as a service programs emerge in 2026. We had seen this entity known as Crimson Collective partner with scattered Lapsus Hunters before they also went quiet on their Telegram channel. So I think you're just going to see more extortion as a service going forward. The entity also advertised a new form of ransomware, which they called Shiny Spider. It's unclear if this is potentially going to be privately operated by the group or if it's going to be operated as a service. So essentially they will have affiliates and they'll get a cut of whatever profits those affiliates receive. So potentially this could be where Muddled Libra, aka Scattered Spider, comes in, since they have used ransomware most recently. And then finally, you have the potential recruitment of insiders, especially at organizations like telecoms, organizations that provide call center services, hosting providers, software as a service, etc. There was an advertisement posted where I think, it aligns very closely with the previous tactics that Lapsus had tried to conduct in recent years. So again, think of this from an insider threat angle. If they're able to pay somebody at one of these existing organizations for access, what kind of havoc can they not only wreak inside of these organizations themselves, but potentially downstream to their clients as well. So I think those three trends, extortion as a service, ransomware, whether it's private or as a service, and then the recruitment of insiders, are three things organizations need to be aware of heading into 2026.
This sounds like three pretty powerful things to keep an eye on. That's pretty powerful weapons in their arsenal. Well, I want to talk about the retail season and the holiday rush a little bit. What single threat tied to this particular threat actor group would you say is most likely to impact retail leaders, and why?
So since this criminal syndicate is likely gone quiet, I'm going to pivot over to a threat activity cluster that Unit 42 has been tracking for quite some time now. We refer to the campaign as Jingle Thief. So think of this similar cyber criminals in the sense that they are financially motivated, but instead of extorting victims, instead of using ransomware, instead of trying to recruit insiders, this criminal group, which is likely based somewhere near Morocco and is also known publicly as Atlas Lion, they conduct gift card fraud. So essentially what they'll do is they will heavily target retailers, especially during US holidays, which there's no shortage of those coming up. And they will target privileged accounts that have access to gift card issuance systems, and they'll essentially issue fraudulent gift cards. They'll monetize that by potentially using money mules on the outside or reselling the cards on different types of underground services, which Unit 42 actively monitors. So essentially they're monetizing things through a much less traceable form of currency in gift cards. So if you're an organization, especially in the retail sector this time of year, you really want to put an emphasis on having visibility into your cloud environments, putting in things like conditional access policies, and making sure that customer accounts is protected as possible with things like multi-factor authentication, for example.
So this feels a little bit like everything is old is new again, because every year we hear about this gift card ring, and yet here we are again. And I have to say, for those of you who are watching this, scroll down, because there is a write-up on Jingle Thief right underneath this. So Matt, last question. You're quartered in the hallway with our CISO right now from retail. What's the one piece of advice you'd give them for this season, and what makes it critical?
So this may seem pretty obvious, but for big, complex organizations, it may not be as easy of a mission to succeed at. but really making sure your cybersecurity teams have a really good relationship and open lines of communication and potentially even run books in place, with your infrastructure owners, your application owners, et cetera. And I say this because typically retail environments put production freezes in place this time of year, because again, one misconfiguration could take down systems, and that means your e-commerce services are down. You could potentially lose revenue and profits from that. And why I bring this up is because vulnerabilities pop up irrespective of the time of year. I remember back in December of 2021 when the Log4j vulnerability came out, and organizations had to really focus on identifying internet accessible devices and trying to make sure those are patched. So I think having a really good relationship in place with your infrastructure or application owners to articulate to them, this is why we need to do potentially an out of band patch, and here's how we're going to structure it in terms of testing and then ultimately deploying it. Because if you think about it, if, for example, the patch failed or took down systems for an hour, what does that look like in terms of lost revenue or profits compared to if a threat actor that is known to use ransomware successfully exploits that vulnerability and they deploy ransomware on your systems? You're potentially looking at days to weeks of downtime, and that's going to be very high in terms of lost revenue or profit. So it's very much a cost benefit analysis that goes into place here. But I think just having that relationship in place with those internal stakeholders goes a long way this time of year, especially when it comes to critical vulnerabilities.
Well, it sounds like there's and Sancho's wish list is a very long one then for the retail sector. They get a lot on their plates right now. I think I started to think of the holiday season as sort of like the litmus stress test for retailers anymore. It just seems to be nonstop action. Matt, I really appreciate you being on the show again. This has been great. I want to have you back. Any final words for our retail folks?
No, I mean, this is make it or break it season. So,
There you
just
go.
want to make sure folks are as prepared as possible for the weeks to come.
All right, Matt. Thanks again for being on the show, and we'll get you next round.
Thanks for having me again, Mitch. Appreciate it.